So I'm so excited to be here with you guys today and appreciate you taking the time this morning to join this session on simulation-based learning. For those of you who don't know me, which I think I know most, if not all of you guys, my name is Jason Silverstein and I'm one of CCIT's instructional designers on the Dover campus. All right, so think back to the last time you prepared for an important job interview. Maybe you practiced answering questions in front of a mirror or asked a friend to role play as the interviewer. That practice probably helped you feel more confident, allowing you to refine your answers and maybe even revealed areas where you needed improvement. Now imagine if that friend was a dynamic AI-driven character, or if you could repeat the same interview in a realistic virtual setting, trying different approaches and seeing how they play out. This is the power of simulation-based learning. It immerses students in realistic, interactive scenarios to mimic real-world environments and processes. It bridges the gap between theory and practice by allowing students to apply their knowledge, practice their skills, and make decisions in a safe, controlled environment where they receive immediate feedback. Today, we're going to explore Hyperskill, a tool for creating dynamic and engaging simulation activities for your courses. So over the next 40 minutes, I'm going to provide you with a brief introduction to what Hyperskill is and how it can be used for simulation-based learning. We'll explore some sample AI simulations. You'll have the opportunity to customize several settings in your own simulation. I'll share some strategies for implementing simulations into various course modalities. And finally, I'll wrap up by making sure you have the necessary resources to request, edit, and share your own simulations. So what exactly is Hyperskill? Hyperskill is a no-code 3D simulation platform that enables the creation of immersive learning experiences, accessible via a web browser on your computer, like Chrome, or through a virtual reality headset like the Meta Quest 3. With this tool, we can create guided lab simulations, assess students performing a skill, and even incorporate generative AI prompts into characters, making the simulations more dynamic and engaging. Now let's take a look at two AI simulations I developed in collaboration with faculty here. So this is a simulation of an elementary school teaching interview that I developed with Megan Sherman from the Owens campus. She wanted to create a simulation where students can practice answering common interview questions. She developed the generative AI prompt in ChatGPT, and then I just had to copy and paste it into the scene to bring the simulation to life. Here's the prompt Megan created for the simulation. Now, a little ChatGPT disclaimer, while we will be using and editing some ChatGPT prompts during this session, I'm not going to be going over how to develop them. At the end of the session, I will provide information for how to generate some ChatGPT prompts if you are interested. Now, let's jump over to the actual simulation. So this is going to be the actual simulation I'm going to show you guys in a second. I just want to make sure the microphone's set up right. Now, even though we can deploy these simulations fully immersive in VR, it's not inherently accessible to people with vision impairments. However, the PC-based versions has voice-to-text using a microphone and text-to-voice using a keyboard to accommodate student preferences. What I want to do now is I want to show you guys this simulation, and I might ask for a volunteer.
Hi and welcome to the Elementary Teacher Simulation. This simulation will allow you to practice answering some common interview questions.
Hi, please take a seat. Are you ready to get started?
Now, I don't want to preface by steering anybody. I would love for a volunteer, somebody that might be brave enough that would like to unmic themselves, because I have it set up so that we can do like mic and mic. You can talk through your microphone, and I have a secondary mic that this is going to pick up. But it's just a basic teaching interview. So you don't even have to talk about elementary ed. You can kind of change the topic if you want. She'll kind of bring you back to the elementary ed interview, but you can really say and do whatever, and it will kind of respond and adapt just like this was a person that you were sitting down and having an interview with. All right, so I'm gonna leave my microphones unmuted in a second, Carol. I'm gonna click this button, and once that microphone's off, feel free that you can speak and you can say, I'm ready to get started. You can ask her a question. You can say whatever you want, and it will just play out. So good luck.
I'm eager to hear your introduction.
Well, hello, and thanks for having me. I'm Carol Malkin, and I am an instructor at Delaware Tech Community College.
Thank you for sharing that. Can you elaborate on your experience at Del Tech Community College and how it might translate to an elementary teaching role?
Oh my, that is a loaded question. But I was a student
Take your
here, so I'm an
time.
alumni
Please
of
feel free to share any
Delaware Tech.
experiences or skills from your role at Del Tech Community College that you believe would be beneficial in an elementary teaching position.
I will say this, it does have a 2-second timeout, so sometimes if there's enough of a pause, it'll just kind of capture what was taken.
Okay. I have good classroom management, and I've taught hybrid and in-person and online courses.
Thank you for sharing your experience in classroom management and teaching hybrid and online courses. These skills can certainly be valuable in an elementary setting. Moving on to the next question. What experience do you have that qualifies you to work in this position?
Taught at the college for 17 years.
Thank you for sharing your 17 years of experience at the college. That's quite impressive. Could you tell me more about how your extensive teaching experience has prepared you for an elementary teaching position?
Again, this is a loaded question. Just my experience with various student demographics and learning levels, education.
Thank you for sharing your experience with various student demographics. This diversity in experience is certainly valuable in understanding different student needs. Let's move on to the next.
So I'll pause it there. Thank you, Carol.
Sure.
As you saw, sometimes it didn't pick up every word when it was going to the mic and mic, but when you're using the mic dedicated, it's usually pretty spot on. And you can even change that timeout. Like right now, it's a 2-second. It used to be real quick, and sometimes you can even allow for longer pauses. The one thing I will say that I thought was interesting in Carol's responses is a lot of time it'll start diving in a little deeper, kind of like what it was doing with the elementary. Like, can you tell me how that relates? So the more you say about like diverse student needs, it might say like, can you give me a story about, or give me a time where you had to kind of teach to multiple diverse populations. So it starts to kind of do that whole dynamic AI driven chat GPT where it realizes your input, it realizes what it wants, and then it kind of starts to kind of tease it out of you. The only other thing I wanted to say on that was that the feedback from students is that they really enjoyed the activity and thought the extra practice and feedback it offers was useful. We're even making plans to pilot the activities again this semester, which we've started. We haven't gotten to this one, but there's a couple other immersive ones, like for instance, a teacher placement that walks them through the whole thing with when they come up to a school with security doors, signing in, showing their license, printing out a badge, going to the classroom and kind of helping the teacher work through a lesson. So it kind of gives them that experience and that exposure to what they would expect when they go on their first placements. All right, so let's close this one now. Let's get back to here. All right, so here's the next one. So this is a simulation of a nurse performing a mental health assessment using a GAD-7 anxiety rater on a patient. I developed this simulation with Danny Cahall from the Owens campus. He wanted to create a simulation where students could practice assessing a patient's mental health. Once again, he developed the generative AI prompt in ChatGPT while I developed the 3D scene. So here's the prompt Danny used to create the simulation, and even used it as a template to make several other mental health simulations based on this one. So I'm going to ask you guys this. After reading this prompt, what would be the first question or statement that you would ask the patient to begin her mental health assessment? And while I'm doing this, Frank, to answer your question, how much was developed was done? So not much, to be honest. these simulations, which as I'm giving you guys time, I mean, they're very bare bones. So the scene itself, this is just a pre-done model of a doctor's office.
Mhm.
She's a character. And this is a monitor that I actually put in there with some extra info that can be displayed, but that's extra.
And
Other, yeah.
the prompts or the conversation, is that just like an interview template that is part of Hyperskill?
So you'd be like this prompt?
Well, like in the last one, right? So, it says, tell me about yourself, right? So there's a set of questions that the interviewer is asking. And then there's the response to the interviewee to drill down or ask follow-up questions. Where does that come from? Is that built in?
It's just the prompt. It's just how well and what you do with the prompt. So for instance, like with the teaching one, it's you arrive at your office for a new elementary teacher interview, you politely greet the candidate and ask your first question. So Megan had 4 questions that for this one course, she really wanted students to work on.
Gotcha.
And then, so like, what experience do you have that qualifies you,
Yeah.
was the next one. But, she put this like you listen intently and only interject with probing questions for clarification. So that's how like we kind of tailored it, that it starts probing more if Carol was to be like, well, I've never taught elementary, then it's going to start asking like, well, what qualifications do you have on like what would make you good for this job? And, if she goes, well, I don't really have any, they kind of try to tease it out of you a little bit more before they move on to the next question. Whereas this one is a little different because we're kind of giving her a profile of what she's, I don't want to say suffering from. I'm not the most medically inclined, but we'll just say, I guess, she is suffering from anxiety. So we give kind of a profile, a little bit about her family, what's going on, a little bit of like what's going on with her. So as you are asking her questions, she kind of knows some potential responses. And then also at the same time is we kind of gave a score or a range for how this person is supposed to answer these questions. So she's not, she doesn't have severe anxiety, but we could change this to somebody that's completely on the far end of the scale and is always so anxious and depressed versus somebody that's kind of in the middle and being proactive looking for help. So once again, it all comes down to that ChatGPT response. That's the bread and butter of this whole thing. Is if you guys can create a ChatGPT prompt that you like working with, even just in ChatGPT, like, wow, this is really good. Copying and pasting in here is pretty much all I have to do because everything else I've done. So the other thing that I'll kind of throw out there, because I say this at the end, is that while this is a tool that you guys are going to all have access to and can build your own simulations, only I have access to the AI tool, which means I have a template that when Carol's like, hey, I want one of these, there's like a whole thing you fill out. Like you can pick the character, you can pick the scene, I'll build it all for you. It takes me like minutes. And as long as you can give me the ChatGPT prompt, when I give it to you, it's done. Like you can just use it right out of the box. But these things can get very, very complex very quickly. Like the teacher placement one, or, if you wanted to work with, they have one on server management, like with working in like a data center. So like they have some ones and some templates that kind of use, but those can get really in depth. Like doing auscultation, like Danny has me doing something with a stethoscope. So when you put it on the patient, you can hear, as long as it's in the right area, you can listen to heartbeats. But if you put it on their forehead, it's not going to do a heartbeat. It's got to be on the front, and you got to be using the stethoscope the right way. Whereas I never knew this. You can actually use the drum and the bell. It's actually the stethoscope. You're supposed to use the different parts of the stethoscope for different measurements. So you can set that up. Like if they're listening to the lungs or the back, they should be using the drum versus the bell. And I don't really know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to stop there. But yeah, so we could do tons. But like Frank, just to kind of go, the low stakes thing that like I'm trying to get more people to check out Hyperskill is syncing it with ChatGPT is like really quick. I'm just going to start going with these questions. I'm going to go right down the line. I'm going to start with Amber's. Let's just go with... So I'll show you how the chat works, because now it's going to work because the simulation's working fine. Seriously?
I've tried deep breathing exercises and even yoga. My husband got me a set of calming essential oils, and I have been using them as well. I've also tried to carve out some time for myself to read or just have a quiet moment, but it's tough with the kids and all the household work. Sometimes it feels like none of these are enough.
Now, before I put in Carol's as the next follow-up with, can you tell me what a typical day looks like? When you guys are developing this prompt, you might be like, she talks too much. Like, keep it concise, or keep like statements to like 1 or 2 statements before you wait for like the next prompt. And so, and maybe it's not, but that's all stuff that in the prompt that we can kind of tailor.
Sure, I wake up around 6 a.m. when my husband leaves for work. I get the kids ready for their day, make breakfast, pack lunches, and then it's time to drop them at school. After that, I come back home to clean the house, do laundry and run errands. By the afternoon, I pick up the kids, help them with their homework, make
Wow.
dinner, clean up, get the kids ready for bed, and then I try to have some time for myself. But by that time, I'm so exhausted that I can barely keep my eyes open. It feels like the days just blur into one another.
And you can see she'll keep going. But once you built that profile of how you want them to behave and act, like, you can keep going. And so Danny told me, I can't remember who the other instructor is that's done this. They did this one, but even before this in VR, they were doing something similar with ChatGPT. And students, when they got into the VR, spent like over 10 minutes like interviewing her, because they just kept going back and forth and just got so engaged with it. So now that you've seen what it can do and you've kind of watched me do it, let's take a couple of minutes and explore some AI simulations on your own. So something I want to point out while you guys are doing that load times of the simulations can vary based on your internet speeds. Another reason why I'm starting off with this is these are very low stakes and can be quicker to load. So more of those bigger, robust assessments, we can say, like if we wanted to do some type of physical therapy assessment, like, you know, working with people and seeing if they're actually going through whatever processes or protocols they should be with patients, we can do it. But sometimes there's a lot more models and they can take a little bit longer to load. If you're on the Wi-Fi at work, good luck. This thing will load like 1% at a time. But if you're at your dock or using a computer, it should be pretty fast. So see if they take a couple seconds to load.
Are you the manager? I have a complaint about the service tonight.
And so Frank, kind of throwing something else out there of something that we kind of were talking about a little earlier. This original simulation, which I repurposed as a angry customer, was all about kind of having students use like the touch screen. So you can see the simplistic nature of this, of like the options. And so we can do stuff like that if, I guess I would say very test out like, you know, we can kind of fabricate like images and like text boxes of what, you know, and put little hotspots for where they're going to touch and like what the responses would be. But that's kind of like how we would like simulate that. I would say it'd be very test out like. All right, so let's talk about editing these simulations, because that's going to be the bulk of what you're going to want to do, especially after I give you one that, while you tailored, you might want to be able to customize it a little bit. So with your Hyperskill account, you're able to create and share as many simulations as you like. So right now with the Hyperskill accounts that you guys have, you can actually go in and create an infinite number of simulations to share with your students. However, in order, as I said before, to create the AI simulations, you're going to need to complete a request form, and then CCIT, me, will create the simulation template in your account to get you started. So the request form process is going to be included with the resources at the end of the session, but I'm just going to show you guys, I don't have it open right now. I'll show you guys at the end, because it's literally a Google form where it's like you're going to buy a house. It's like, which character do you want? Which scene do you want? Which voice do you want? And you can hear all the voices, so you can kind of select and choose however the scene's going to be built. But it'll be a very bare bones template, like person, scene, prompt, it works. And so if you want to edit that a little bit, that's what we're going to get into now and how to customize that. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to log in, and don't worry, I'll actually do this with you guys. So if you want to, we're going to go log into the website, boom. From there, we're going to go to this downloads. We're going to go to try Hyperskill online. This will all be in the documentation at the end. There's also videos for you guys at the end too in that documentation. We're going to go to My Simulations. The first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to select your department or which training you're a part of from the dropdown. Anything that's in private are going to be ones that you created. And if you haven't created anything, you won't have anything in there. But I am creating departments for everybody. So like ITN would have a department and like all of their simulations go in there that only Frank and other ITN members would access. Whereas Carol, I want to say is in PT, but you are not PT. You are, oh my God. Are you OTA?
Exercise science.
Oh, that's right, exercise science. So there'd be like an exercise science with Carol and all of her simulations in there. So for today, you're going to either be a part of training 1 or training 2. And April might have put everybody in training 1 just because there's so few people. So you'll select training 1, and then you'll see a whole list of all the different simulations that are available to you. So you'll find the one that you want, which you'd click on, and then you just go to the pencil. And that's how we open the editor. The last thing, while there are many, many things that you can customize in here, we're going to keep it simple. Right here is the little option of how the different, like these are basically your tabs that you can kind of select. I'm only going to talk about 3 of them. The first one being AI. This is literally just your ChatGPT prompt. It's going to be a paragraph, just copy and paste it in there. So if your prompt is not working right, or you thought it was going to do something different, but she's, the person's just blabbing and you want to put something in there to keep their responses concise or down to, 1 or 2 facts. This is where you can kind of edit that response. Or if you're working in ChatGPT to work on your prompt, you could literally just copy and paste it here, boom. So that's probably the most prevalent. These other 2 is where, it gets to be a little bit more complicated to make changes, but the scenario flow is the non-code logic of your scene. And I'll show you all of the basic sims that I built you guys that you're going to get is going to be a message pops up that informs students what to do. The character in the scene says something, and then it just works. So really the only 2 things I would say generally you might want to update is maybe you want to change the message, and maybe you don't want them to say, hi, welcome to, hi, what is your first question for the interview? And it might be something like, welcome to cardiokinetics, how can we help you? And so like you might just want to change those prompts. And the last one, which everybody wants to do until they start getting into it, and trust me, I'm just going to throw it out there. It's frustrating at first, especially if you've never dealt with a 3D builder, because when you realize things have depth, you throw like a desk in the scene, and next thing you know, you're like, that looks great. But when you look at it from the side, it's like floating. So it can be a little overwhelming, but everybody always wants to put new things in the scene, or they want to make it look like an office. And this is that scene layout. You can put as many models as you want into the scene. You can change your characters, all kinds of stuff. And so that'll be the last one that we kind of look at. So now we're going to log in and we're going to go through this. So we're actually going to kind of work on and customize our own AI sims. So first off, we're going to go to Hyperskill, which I'm going to drop in the chat. So if you click on Hyperskill or that bottom link, it should look something like this. It might actually be blank in here, but in the end, you should see the login in the top right. And you might already be logged in. It might have your name, a profile picture if you're that quick. I'm going to select login. And it didn't even give me the option, but normally it pops up here and I would select my JSilver 5. Boom. We're now going to go to downloads. Now, just something to put out there, you never have to do this with your students. Just like I gave you guys links before, you can give your students links, and as long as they have an account that they set up once, any link you give them will just automatically open and launch the simulations. There's also ways to embed them into D2L, and I will show you that later as well. All right, we're going to go to try Hyperskill online. You can download a desktop version. I found out our antivirus likes to block a lot of the stuff, so it doesn't really work. And we're not putting it onto a VR headset, and typically you do that in the headset. So we're always going to select this first option. Once again, it might take you a little bit longer or slower to load depending on where you're at. All right, when we're here, we're going to go to My Simulations. I will point out, because Frank just kind of asked it, but one of the things that's really cool about this tool is that you can upload as many images or documents as you want that can be displayed in the simulations. You can also upload any 3D model you want. So there's tons of 3D model websites out there, but if you're very specific in exercise science, and there's like a certain tool, while Hyperskill has a lot of models, especially in like the allied health and nursing field, maybe there's some kind of measurement tool for movement that you want to see if the person's knee is able to move, and so you can upload your own version of that tool. Same thing with characters. So they allow for a lot in this. But we're going to go to My Simulations. Now yours is not going to look like this. Your private is probably going to be blank. And if you go to this drop-down list and you go to Training 1, you should see these 10 demos, which ironically are in order. And for some reason, they're usually out of order. So this is kind of exciting to me. So when you go here, we're going to go to the drop-down, which should say Training 1. And then each one of you will click on whichever demo you're trying to access, and then the pencil. And just because I don't need to go to the master one, April, did you use 9 at all? I don't think you used 9, right?
No.
All right, I'm going to use this one. And we're going to hit the pencil, which should open up your simulation. And when I say bare bones, I mean this is what you're going to get. And I've noticed that I've by accident copied April's, because there's still these things, these alcohol prep pads that I left in here by accident when she put them in there the last time. But that's it. You'll pick the scene, you'll pick the character, and then I'll pretty much drop this for you, unless you want to give me a little help on how you want it to look. And I've been kind of helping some people dress their scenes up. First off, we're going to go to AI because it's the easiest. You don't have to work with any of the settings. I've already enabled them, but right here is your prompt. And so you can change this to any prompt. It was an instructional designer, but like I said, I copied the wrong one when we saw that there was the vice president for academic affairs was open. But you can change this to you're interviewing me for a job as a high school chemistry teacher, or a network support, network engineer, or a physical therapist, or anything. So right off the bat, you can just change what the job is. It just says I'm looking to be hired for this job, and you, the interviewer, ask questions. You'll ask. I kept it so general that you can just basically change what the job is, and when you run it, you'll see very quickly that it now is all tailored towards networking or physical therapy, or a high school science job versus a higher ed math position. And so that's really all you have to change in the prompt. And like I said, if you work in ChatGPT or ever played with it, if you can make a prompt in ChatGPT, you can copy and paste it here and it will work the exact same way, only you'll have a character that's now interacting with you versus just that black and white screen. Now, do not do this, but I'd like to tell everybody that typically after you do one thing, it's always nice to test it. And the only reason I don't want you to test it is if some of your guys' computers load a little slower, I don't want you to get stuck in loading. But what you do to test anything and to save it is we're going to go right up here to save. We're going to select that. We're going to make sure it's public. I don't know why I don't checked it. That's how you can share it. And then I'm going to hit save. Now I'm not going to hit play, but this is how you can test it out to make sure it's working. Right now I'm just going to hit back. But as I've told you guys when I work on templates and anything, if you make one change, test it before you kind of play with something else, because then you'll actually be able to isolate what went wrong. All right, so that's the AI. Let's go up here to scenario flow. And right here, you just have this one block of quote unquote code. Now, when you click on the block or on any one of these, it will bring up what all of these things mean. And when we look through it, while there's lots of words and drop downs, and you can add your own, you don't have to. You can see right here off the bat, it says that the doctor is going to sit If you wanted to change him to laying down or standing, like this is one of those things that you could change. So let's just leave him as sitting because we don't even know what that looks like. Here's that display message that you can change, instructions to be updated. Maybe you don't like begin, you want to use the word start. And then some of the ones like you probably don't want to change, like it has the virtual person look at you. So basically as you walk around the room, they're going to constantly be looking at you, turning their head. But maybe, you know, it's not an interview, so maybe it's not, are you ready to get started? You know, maybe if this was physical therapy, you know, have you completed your stretches and are ready to work on your first machine? And so that's really it as far as what you can change here. There's tons of blocks. If you're familiar with this kind of coding, you can block, you can link stuff together. I mean, it can get very complex, but there's nothing in here that you guys actually have to update unless you wanted to. And then the last one, scene layout. This is where you started out. Now, it can get a little, it can take you a minute to get used to it, but your W, A, S, and D on the keyboard are how you kind of move about in the scene. Your mouse, right-clicking and dragging the mouse is how you change the camera. And so you can see this is a big open classroom, and we can fill it with all kinds of desks, and I could show you some ones that I've done before that actually looks like a classroom. But over here, you'll see this is where there are about 158 pages. I think right now they're up to about a little over 1,600 different types of 3D models that you can either look through or you can search. And I mean, they have everything from, they do full-on aviation training in here. So like doing like air traffic control and actually having planes and drones that you kind of fly, things like that. Like there's tons of stuff. They do a lot of nursing and allied health and education and like lab setups. So if you wanted to do, you know, mixing chemicals and watching the colors change and reactions happening, like all of that stuff is programmable. But we can also search for things. So we can search for, you know, like a computer. No, let's go with a desk. A desk. And I can either hit enter or hit the little search. And I'm gonna hit enter because the little search didn't seem to want to work. And so right now, let's just say I like this desk, computer desk 2. Or maybe this one, I like this, computer desk 3. You just click on it, and you don't have to click a million times, just click and wait for it to load, and then it's just on your mouse. So I'm not clicking and dragging, I'm just moving the mouse. You can see right here, it looks like it's on the floor, and all of a sudden when I hit like that wall, it kind of starts floating. So this is what I mean, like right here, well, I can tell you it is snapped to the floor right now. When I click, I can kind of walk around and kind of look to see, like I can even zoom in, like, oh yeah, that's on the floor. But when you start working in this 3D stuff, which is why you don't have to do it, like that, you might say, oh yeah, like maybe there wasn't you're like, that looks fine. But when you walk over to it, you'll realize like, oh, it's not on the ground, it's floating. So messing around in these 3D spaces can be quite frustrating. And April can like start nodding her head because she's worked in some other programs with me, and this is the most infuriating part of it. Not how to like code it or get it to like work the way you want. It's literally being like, oh dang it, now that's like in the floor. And so, you know, getting some of this stuff to be proper is difficult, but also not what you have to be working on. So that's where everybody loves, they're like, I want to put like a monitor on the desk. And it's like, okay. But then it's like, they're like, yeah, like it's here. Like, how do I then move it? And it's like, well, there's a lot of different things. So these tools right here allow you to move and remove things. The up, down, left, right allows you to click on any object and move it in that two-dimensional space. Left, right, forward, backwards. The little elevator buttons, I like to call them, help just move things literally up and down. And you can kind of start to see, like when they're kind of have that, like those lines through it, you can kind of see it's still inside an object. So it's like trying to find that magic. I mean, this is what takes me the majority of the time. When somebody says they need something, It's not that like, oh, you need a stethoscope to work on a patient and do lung sounds. It's like placing the patient on the table, not in the table. Like making sure that the lung sound is actually like in the appropriate spot and not just like at their kidneys. Like, so, and that's all me. So you can add whatever you want to this scene. Like I said, you can keep searching up stuff, but they have an endless supply of all kinds of machines, and they're really cool. They're a small company. Pretty much anything you want, they'd add. So they have some heart models in here because what they're trying to do is kind of make this like a multi-session, because you can do multiplayer, where students can actually like pick up models and you can kind of teach in here. So there's, like I said, there's tons of stuff. There's pet stuff because they're doing like pet dissections in here. So there's a whole cat and dog anatomy, angle grinder because they do a lot of workforce stuff. So if there's a need, they pretty much will put models in there if we ask them for it too. So the only other one that I will put in there is the resize. So like right here, I can kind of show you like things kind of snap a little bit, like that's snapping to the desk, but it's too large. The last two tools are rotate, which literally will just rotate your objects and not move them. And the scale tool, which as you click and drag on it, will then just scale things appropriately. So you can scale it, you can move it, we can rotate it, and you can spend hours just building a cool scene for you to have. And like I said, that's the most infuriating and kind of frustrating part, is kind of like placing these things. Because like, you know, you'll do this and then all of a sudden you'll be like, I think I got this right. And then you're like, oh no, I moved the desk. I meant to move this horse. And it can be, like I said, a little bit infuriating, but those are the three things that once you receive your simulation that you can edit. But I will basically build a character, a voice. I'll put all the basic, not rules, scenario in. So you'll have this basic thing with a message. They'll look at you, they'll say something. And then I'll put your prompt in if you have one. And if you don't have one, I'll put like a generic prompt in just so your scene will actually be able to work. Okay, and now how we test it is I'm gonna go up to save. I'm gonna hit save. And now the last thing you can do is hit play and it will load your scene up. And I'm just loading it so you can see some of the changes I made and how it's different than yours. So you got the little change me. He's sitting.
Have you completed your stretches and are ready to work on your first machine?
We obviously see he's sitting, but there's no chair. So we probably would want to change that to standing. I mean, maybe laying down because maybe he fell. And this is a whole scene where you're going to see if he's okay and asking him for help. The controls are always over here, blah, blah, blah. You can start talking, and I'm just going to quit right now. So now you guys all have your own simulations that you can kind of play with. My little disclaimer before I show you and talk about the resources and everything and kind of wrap up today is these are not your sims. If you want one, request one. Like, I'm not going to remove you guys yet. I think I gave the other team like a week or two, but eventually, because these are demos that I build out for training, I'll kind of wipe these out so that for the next training I have like new people. But for right now, I'm not going to get rid of them. But if you really want one, just put in the request form when you're ready. Okay, so let's get back. Let's wrap this up. All right. So it's great that you can create these activities, but what are some strategies to actually implement them into your courses? So for face-to-face activities, I would say that there's mainly two different types of approaches. There's what's called a one-to-many, which is when there's only one device, maybe the teacher workstation for a classroom. And so with this strategy, you could conduct a teacher-led activity. You could demo the whole thing while projecting on the board. You could have a student lead the activity while you, at the teacher workstation, while you kind of are walking around the room and helping to kind of prompt and guide them maybe. You can evolve the student-led activity and make it more of a collaborative class activity by letting the student guide the simulation and having the rest of the students in the class kind of tell them what they should say and do. Kind of like what I told you, what I kind of had you guys do. Like I was kind of leading it, but you guys were the ones giving me the suggestions. And the last thing too is you can use tools like this to create your own recordings. Work through a simulation, do some things that that are hot button topics that you'd want students to kind of be able to see. And then you can ask them, like, what would you do now? Or how would you react in this situation? Ask them for areas of improvement. And you can even get feedback from the AI to see like what you or the students did well and what there's areas of improvement on. Now, the other one is a one-to-one. Now, that's the most desirable. Everybody has their own machine. You can have everybody kind of playing with this at once, and everybody then is engaged in some way, or you can guarantee that everybody's engaged at the same level. Now, if you have enough devices, that's great. Now, while many students have their own laptops, currently the wireless infrastructure, as I said, on campus is not strong enough to support a classroom of students using this. The simulation load times can be very slow. And when I say slow, I mean sometimes like 5 to 7 minutes to load a single simulation versus like 30 to 60 seconds like you saw today. And so IT has recommended that you use a computer lab if you would like that. And I will say, as people start looking into using tools like this or VR, maybe talk to your IT people at your campus so they're aware of how slow internet speeds are not conducive for activities like this. And for like online activities, you can also use Hyperskill and D2L, because I'll show you a picture of that, to create optional practice opportunities for students to hone their skills when they're not in the class. And so if you put it in D2L, it's right there on a page for students, embedded like a video or any other content. And there's pluses and minuses to both. There's a lot of different ways that you can share these with students, but I'm only going to talk about two main ones. So speaking of these simulations and how to share them, there are two main ways that you can do it. First is by providing a link. And so the link is going to load, just like the links I gave you guys today, it loads the simulation right away. But the downside to that is all of your students will have to have an account. Now you saw how easy it was to set up an account with your Dell Tech, but they have to have an account to access any links. If they don't, they will not be able to access the links. On the flip side, what we could do is actually export a file from Hyperskill and upload it into D2L. And so when a student clicks on this link, they actually do not need an account, and it will load directly in D2L. Ironically, and this is in the directions and all the resources I'm going to provide you guys in like 30 seconds, well, over here, you kind of saw that it did the whole like 0 and then it kind of froze on 90% maybe for like a couple seconds, and then it'll just be a blank white screen that has nothing on it. You won't even know it's loading. And then all of a sudden you'll see that whole like Hyperskill 90% and it goes. And it says that in the directions, like it might stay like that for like 60 seconds. And so you need an account, you don't need an account. Launches in the browser, you can launch it in D2L. You can see it loading slow or fast. You don't see anything until it kind of like, I look at it as like you're like a car like and the light goes green. You hit the gas and you're just spinning out, and then eventually it catches up and you kind of see what's happening. But either one, it just depends on how you want to do this. And so they're both viable and they're both great solutions, but there's some pros and cons to each. Okay, so how do you share? It's the same process we went through. I'm going to show it to you, but we're not actually going to do it. You're going to log in. You're going to go back to downloads. Now, students won't ever have to go here. This is only like a you thing. You're going to go back to Try Hyperskill Online. We're going to go back to My Sims. You're going to select the drop down. You're going to go select which one you want to share with your students. You're going to go back to the pencil. Now, from it here, you don't actually have to do anything. You just hit save. That little pop-up comes up. Now you want to make sure it does say public, because that's another thing. If it doesn't say public, people won't be able to see it. I usually check this off before I send them to you guys, and then when you hit save, this pops up. Now you can do one of two things. Right here, you can copy this URL and give it to anybody. And anybody that has a Hyperskill account will be able to open this, and it will launch the simulation automatically. Now, I'm going to preface this too. You see the little button here that everyone's like, oh, there's a copy button. It does not work. I don't care if you highlight this first and hit it. I don't care if you hit it. It never copies it. So you just need to click on the link and do a basic like Control C or right click copy kind of thing to get it. The other option is to export that file. And if you don't want to give the link, but you want to upload it into D2L, you hit this Export Scorum button and it will download a zip file for you. I have a video and all of the directions on the resources I'm about to give you, but I wasn't going to show you guys how to like upload it. It's a pretty straightforward process. But something that I want to point out is when you upload a Scorum, it always gives you the option that says, make this a gradebook activity. And all I would say to you is think about it before you actually say yes. And the reason why I say that is because there's nothing in here that triggers what students did as correct or incorrect. So how does it grade it? And everybody wants to do these as graded assignments. So if you do that, there needs to be some way that it's going to transfer a grade or pass. And so while there are Scorums that can do that kind of thing, I just leave these as ungraded objects. And if you want them to be part of a graded assignment, I think you just make it part of the assignment. Like, hey, you can interview this person or run this simulation and then you kind of record yourself and do that. Like, so you give them those options, but you don't require them. And like I said, we can make these fully accessible on the PC, but some people wanted to do it in VR and make it a grade, and it's like, right, but like what about people that get sick? Like not everybody likes VR and is comfortable, so there's some options. So I just want to throw that out there. I love making these things practice opportunities. And last but not least, to wrap up, I wanted to share some great resources that will assist you in requesting, customizing, and sharing your own Hyperskill AI simulations. So let me drop this into the chat. This is my, and I see some of you guys put some message in here, so I'll look at them in a second. This is my Hyperskill user's guide. It's a twofer for you guys. One, because it's a Google Doc, and two, if you've never seen document tabs on a Word doc, you'll now be able to experience them, which is pretty much like making a million different files in one file now, which is pretty awesome. So this will take you through everything. How to create an account, but you guys don't need to do that. How to launch a simulation, well, you kind of don't need to do that because I've already given it to you. How to request a simulation, you'll want to check that out. And right now the process is you just submit an IT ticket because we want to make sure that the number of people that want these and to show the amount of use is tracked so that we can kind of make a case for it later. But after you basically put a ticket in that's saying like, hey, I'd like to build a simulation, and it tells you like there's like a copy and paste, like just copy and paste this in. One of our amazing ed techs will just respond with a link to a survey that you'll take. And that's the one where it's like, pick this, like go shopping, like which one of these do you want and which voice do you want and which scene do you want? And once you submit that, I say it takes a week, but like honestly, I'm not being bombarded by multiples of these a day. So pretty much within a day or two, I've been able to get these back to anybody that's requested one. Here's all the steps for how to edit an AI simulation. And once again, they're all text-based and video-based. So like there's the video for how to do it. And then last but not least, how to share. So how do you share a link and how do you upload into D2L? And it's all there. So I don't need to explicitly go over it, but as you guys have questions, like, feel free, reach out. As it's noon and I want to respect your time, I can stick around for any questions, but I just wanted to say, I hope this session on simulation-based learning and Hyperskill has been enlightening. I want to thank all of you for attending and participating in today's session, and hope the rest of you, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. So thanks.